Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Lauren.
I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark.
Dark.
Paradise After Dark is an independent podcast covering true crime,
Unsolved mysteries,
missing people,
urban legends, and every now and then a creepy place.
If you'd like to support our show and get a bunch of extra Paradise After Dark content, plus early and ad-free episodes, sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/Palmahawk Media. That's PALMAHAWK Media.
And be sure to check out our website, paradiseafterdark.com.
On the website, you'll find links to all of our episodes, even the archived episodes, merch store, mailing list, links to our socials, and of course, our Patreon.
We also have a little virtual tip jar there, so if you want to help out our show, just swing by there and give us a little tip, and we'll give you a shout on the show.
And let's get back into it. So in part 2...
Do we need to recap, or if you haven't listened, obviously this is not where you want to start. You want to go back to
part 1 and part 2. But part 2 of this saga, we played the first half of Brian Winchester's testimony against Denise Williams at her trial, which was pretty emotional.
Very emotional.
Pretty raw. And I really would like to just pick up here. Before we get into the rest of the story, we have the second half of his testimony, which isn't quite as long as the first half. It will pretty much bring you the conclusion of this story. So here we go.
It was later that evening when you were searching before the letter came in. Did you find anything that evening?
Yes, sir. I didn't really... I knew where Mike's boat was, and I didn't really want to be the one that found it. I would rather somebody else have found it, but my dad was just real determined, and, he took us to a spot. I knew he was going to be there, but he took us to a spot, and sure enough, there was Mike's boat. So we found his boat, I think we just left it. We didn't touch it. We left it where it was and went back in and told whoever the law enforcement people were there at the time. But shortly thereafter, a pretty bad rainstorm, and I think cold front came through that night.
And did you go back to the lake the next day?
I'm sure I did. The next 2 months are kind of a blur for me, but yes, I spent lots of time at the lake during the search, because I kind of wanted to monitor what was going on. I wanted to put up a good, front to look like I was out there looking like everybody else. But I was out there a lot.
At some point, a hat was found on the lake. Is that not?
A hat?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Were you the one that found that hat?
I was not the one that found it. I was the one that put it in the water during one of my searches on the lake. Denise and I were getting concerned that nothing else was being found out there. And I was hoping that his waders and jacket and all would be found to kind of confirm that he had drowned there. And I wanted to keep the searchers in that particular area. So I took a hat that was similar to a hat that Mike used, which was real distinctive. It had a weird looking bill on it and stuff. And when I was out there with another friend of mine, I threw it in the water in that area because I wanted to keep the people in that area, because I wanted the waders and the jacket to be found to confirm that that's where Mike was and where he went into the water.
Was that hat eventually found?
It was.
And you were asked to identify it?
Yes, sir.
You told law enforcement it was Mike?
Yes, sir.
You brought up a point about you and Denise had concerns, or were talking at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Following Mike's murder on the 16th, what communication did you have with Denise?
I can't remember the first time that we talked. We had prearranged that obviously our communication needed to be minimal, both by phone and in person. Obviously, we weren't going to be meeting up in parking lots and having sex and doing all that was normal for us to be doing. So we had decided that it's just too close to me.
You can push back a little bit. It's a little louder than it used to be.
It feels like I'm at a concert. But so we had decided ahead of time that we really needed to minimize our contact. I got a lot of information about Denise and what was going on with Denise through Kathy, who was going over to her house and seeing her and talking to her. Denise kind of sequestered herself up in her bedroom and didn't want to be around a lot of people during that time, which was smart of her to do. And so I got a lot of information from Kathy, but eventually, she and I talked. And there never was a conversation that was like, well, did it all go according to plan? Or, first of all, I didn't want to talk about that because that was not the plan. What happened with Mike was not the plan that Denise and I had come up with. And
Let me stop you right there. I want to make it clear. The plan didn't play out the way you wanted to, but was it the plan that you and Denise had discussed to actually have him killed?
The plan was for his death to occur, but it was not for it to occur in the way that it did. I mean, the plan was for him to fall in the water and for him to have a chance to survive it. But obviously that's not what happened, and I didn't want to tell Denise that. So we never had a conversation that was like, did it all go according to plan? But it was quite obvious from the circumstances that Mike was gone, and she assumed that what we talked about, the plan that we had made, she assumed that was what had happened. It wasn't until years later that I tried to and somewhat told her that that's not what ended up happening.
Okay. So at some point you and her started talking again despite the distances. When was that?
The first time, I'd be guessing. I mean, I would say a few days before we talked. I'm sure the first time we talked was just on the phone. It was a little while before I saw her in person because I remember being kind of nervous, and I just knew it would be weird to see her because of what we had done. I just knew it would be weird to see her after that, kind of to face each other after that. But as the search went on and long term, as things got back to normal, we just kind of settled back into the same routines. But the next thing, obviously, that we had to deal with was the fact that his body wasn't being found. And so the concern between she and I then became, well, if his body's not found, what's going to happen with the life insurance?
Okay. This is a conversation you're having with her?
Yes.
Okay. And what is she saying? What is her concern?
Well, that if his body's not found, what's going to happen? Is she going to get the money or not?
Did you and or her take any steps to facilitate that?
To facilitate her getting the money?
Yeah.
I was not in a hurry to push that issue. I felt like we needed to kind of lay low on that and not appear to be, the eager widow ready to cash in on her life insurance. Also, she was getting, at that time, insurance companies were paying a ridiculous amount. I think 8% they were required to pay on death benefit proceeds. So she was earning 8% as long as the money sat there, which you couldn't get that outside in a bank or anything like that. So I knew the longer it drug out, the better it was going to be. And we talked about that. Again, it was actually my dad, because he was concerned about Denise, and he wanted her to get her money so she could pay her bills. And he pushed it through the hoops that needed to happen for her to end up getting the money quickly as she could. But what he came to learn, what we all came to learn was she was going to have to get a death certificate issued by a judge through a court. So probably my dad or me hooked her up with an attorney, Kurt Hunter, and she talked with Kurt about what needed to be done. And I think basically she had to file a petition with the court stating everything that happened, talking about what a wonderful marriage she had with Mike. There was no reason for him to run off on her. I can't remember what all had to go in the petition, but we talked about that ahead of time. And she ended up filing a petition, and it was granted, and she was issued a death certificate, so she was able to get the money.
Were there any conversations about what had happened?
About what had happened specifically with Mike?
Yes.
No.
Okay. At some point, law enforcement takes other looks at the cases and interviews people. Did y'all have any conversations about that?
Well, this was years later, and a lot transpired in between Mike's death and law enforcement getting involved. I think it was 3 years later, maybe. But the first thing that happened with me was I just got a call from a deputy. I don't remember if it was a Jackson County sheriff officer or a investigator with FDLE, but I got a call from somebody, and they wanted to talk to me about Mike Williams and the case, and I agreed and went into FDLE on Riggins Road there and interviewed with two gentlemen there. And it became quite clear to me during that interview that they were suspicious of what happened, and not only that, they were suspicious of me and Denise. And I think even after I left that interview, I called her immediately and was freaking out, that this was going on. And
right there. So you've gone in, you've done an interview. You mentioned that there were a lot of things that happened prior to that. And this is approximately 2003, 2004, something like that?
Yes, sir. Right.
So prior to that occurring, had you and Denise talked about a possibility of what you would do if law enforcement started investigating this?
Yeah, I mean, we basically weren't going to say anything. We had the word that we put on it was we had an agreement that she would never say anything about me and I would never say anything about her, because we knew, or we felt like, that as long as neither one of us talked, that nobody would ever, find out what happened. So we called it our agreement, basically, and we were probably pretty arrogantly confident in that agreement, I guess.
Did you and her take any steps to ensure the fact that wiretaps or having a conversation with her, code words, code signals, things like that?
We didn't get that way until after law enforcement started looking into things. The other thing that made us really paranoid was Denise. At first, Denise was allowing Cheryl, Mike's mom, to see Ansley and taking Ansley, Mike and Denise's daughter, Ansley, out to Cheryl, Grandma Cheryl's house. And on one of those trips out to Cheryl's house, Denise found a notebook that Cheryl had, and she had written her suspicions about Denise and me and what had happened with Mike. And when Cheryl was in another room or something, Denise read that and came back and told me what she had read and really freaked out about it. And at that point didn't want any contact with Cheryl, really. But between that and law enforcement getting involved, we became very paranoid about being monitored. So we agreed and talked about we weren't going to talk about anything on the phones anymore. We were worried about our cars being bugged, our houses being bugged. We had hand signals that we would use if we needed to talk about something related to Mike or law enforcement.
What were those hand signals?
One of them was a C for Cheryl, and then the other one was this, like jail bars. So when we did that, we knew that one or the other of us had something to talk about, and we would usually go, there is a park next to Denise's house. Along Mixookie Road, we would go out to that park and go way out in a field on a bench, and we would leave our cars in the vehicle, we would leave our phones in the vehicle, make sure we didn't have a phone on us. We were very concerned that we were being watched or monitored by law enforcement.
Now, backing up again prior to the interview, you're still married in 2000 to Kathy. And you started your relations back with Denise. At some point, did your marriage with Kathy start falling apart?
Yes, sir.
When was that?
I mean, it had started, when Denise and I started our affair in 97, but after Mike was gone, Kathy and I spent even more time with Denise, the three of us doing a lot of things, just because Denise and I wanted to be together. And yeah, things just got worse and worse. I mean, Kathy, told me later, that after Mike was gone, it was like there was no reason for me and Denise to be apart from each other. She made comments like that, but I think she was suspicious of us, all along. But I never admitted to Kathy that Denise and I were having an affair, obviously, and that was just kind of basically the next step in the plan, but it couldn't be right off because that would look bad. So Kathy and I ended up staying together. I think our divorce wasn't finalized until 2004, I believe.
At some point, did you and Kathy separate prior to the divorce?
Yes, sir.
At some point, was there a situation where you backtracked essentially and made a pledge to try and get back with Kathy and not go with Denise?
Yes, sir.
What was that about?
There was a lot that led up to that. As you said, we were separated. So Kathy and I were separated. I had a house to myself. There was the incident that we talked about earlier with Angela Stafford, where Denise walked in on Angela and I in my bedroom. After that happened, Denise was furious, and she, we had a briefcase full of mementos, cards, notes, letters, pictures, videos, all sorts of things. She left my house and went to her house and burned it all. She was very angry with me. I didn't know it at the time, but she actually was having sex with a guy that she worked with at work. And I think when she caught me with I'm sorry? Yes, sir. And so when she caught me with Angela, I think she decided at that point, well, I'm going to drop Brian and pursue a relationship with Mr. Bunker. And so things just basically went to hell with me and Denise. And long story short, I just realized what a disaster my life was at that point. And Denise and I we hadn't broken up. She had basically dumped me for Chuck. And I found myself at church one day on July 4th, heard a sermon about freedom. I felt like I was a slave to all that I had been living for, in my relationship with Denise. And I had I guess you would call it a spiritual awakening or conversion, however you want to term it. Eventually, the relationship with Denise and Mr. Bunker went haywire and south. They had their legal issues with each other.
Let's stop there real quick because you're on Mr. Bunker. Was there an incident between you and Mr. Bunker?
That happened prior to me going to church that day, but yes, sir. The way that I found out about Denise and Chuck was she left town with him, went up to Atlanta on a trip together. And I found out from one of her sisters that they were in Atlanta, and I was not happy. I was angry. And I wanted to confront her, because we had been through a lot, done a lot for each other. I mean, I gave up half of my son's life to be with her, killed her husband, and we'd done a lot to be together, and then for her to turn around and go sleep with Chuck didn't make me happy. So I found out they were in Buckhead in Atlanta, and I drove up there to confront her. I didn't really care about him so much, but I ended up sitting in a lobby in a hotel, and they came strolling by together, and I confronted them, and we ended up going outside and having a long argument, conversation out next to the street in Buckhead. I wanted Chuck gone. I didn't want to deal with Chuck. So my main focus was, you need to get rid of Chuck. She got rid of him, got him to leave us alone, and she and I spent the night together in the hotel. And I didn't know it at the time, but she was just kind of placating me when Chuck was, I think, got a room down the hallway in the hotel. Didn't really leave. So we had that incident. And Denise told me later that the way that she got rid of Chuck was she told him that if he didn't leave, that I could have her turned in for insurance fraud, which I thought was just, it blew my mind that she told him that. I couldn't believe that she admitted that to another party.
Did you hear her say that, or is that just what she told you?
She told me this later, and we argued about it later. So the incident with Chuck happened, and I drove back to Tallahassee, and I was just done. I was just spent, and that's what kind of led me to I guess, what I thought at the time was rock bottom. I didn't know I had so many rock bottoms ahead of me, but at that point, I ended up in church and kind of had a spiritual reawakening. And over the next few months, I decided that I wanted to try to reconcile with Kathy. I still loved Denise. I still wanted to be with Denise. Eventually, Denise and Chuck's relationship imploded, and they had their, legal issues and whatnot. And so they broke up. My dad actually helped Denise through all of that.
So they break up. You tried to get back with Kathy?
They broke up, and Denise kind of had her own spiritual awakening. And I know this sounds all screwy, but we wanted to be together still, but we both agreed that the right thing for me to do was to try to get with Kathy. And if Kathy decided that wasn't going to happen, then we were free to be together.
Is that what you did?
And so, yes, I tried to reconcile with Kathy.
Did that work out?
Not well.
Eventually, you and Kathy end up in a divorce.
Yes, sir. We ended up getting divorced. And so we're free to be together.
When was the divorce with Kathy?
We married 94. This is terrible, but I don't remember when it was finalized because we had a long separation. I don't remember when the divorce itself was finalized.
At some point, did you and Denise start becoming public with your dating?
Yes, sir. After the divorce was finalized and we decided enough time had passed from Mike's death, we decided it was okay for us to gradually start dating. And, we talked about it with a lot of people. There were some people that took it well. There were some people, like her family and her dad, who took it horribly. But we did start dating.
Eventually you got married.
And then we got married in 2005. We were still concerned about the law enforcement side of it, but as time passed and nothing happened, we became less and less concerned about it.
You say that you're still concerned. Did y'all have communications between each other on but what would you do if law enforcement ever interviewed?
Right. Things would come up in the media. We would see things online or in the news. Cheryl, never gave up and kept pushing things. And so from time to time, that issue would be raised. And I always wanted to talk about things a lot more than Denise. Denise did not like to talk about anything related to that usually. But we would typically not talk in the house. We would typically talk, out at Lake Ella or a public place or wherever where we felt like we weren't being monitored, even at that point.
And did y'all have an agreement, the agreement not to talk to law enforcement?
Yes, we promised each other that neither one of us would ever say anything. Because we knew the only way that we felt like the only way they would get anything would be if one of us talked. And I was concerned about Denise if she ever got under that pressure, whether she would hold up to it or not. Kathy actually warned me. I think the first time I heard Kathy talk about it, she said, Kathy was trying to get me to talk, but basically she said, you can't trust Denise and she'll throw you under the bus the first chance she gets.
Would it be fair to say that you made assurances to her, that being Denise, that you had not told anybody else about this particular case?
Yes, sir.
And did she make assurances to you that she had not told anybody else?
The only person I knew of was Mr. Bunker, but she didn't say that Mike was murdered or anything like that. She just supposedly right.
Okay. Now, in 2016, you were there was the kidnapping arrest.
Yes, sir.
And following that, you confessed to the murder of Mike, correct?
Yes, sir.
You led law enforcement to his remains.
Yes, sir.
The conversations with Denise, leading up to the murder, did they occur in Leon County for the most part?
Yes, sir.
The conversations with Denise following the murder, where the agreement was never to talk to law enforcement, did that occur in Leon County, Florida?
Yes, sir.
Whenever she set up her alibi to stay at home and make phone calls, did that occur in Leon County, Florida?
Yes, sir.
Talk a lot about Denise Winchester, or Williams, formerly Winchester. Do you see her in the courtroom today?
Yes, sir.
Can you please point to her and indicate an article of clothing?
An article of clothing, the pink sweater.
And the record please reflect as indicated the defendant is Denise Williams.
Okay. So, of course, Denise's attorney argued that there was no physical evidence linking Denise to the crime and that it had been entirely Winchester's idea. And I guess that kind of seemed to be their only defense.
That was her only defense. But after 4 days of testimony, the jury took 8 hours to convict Denise on all charges. Now remember, she was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and accessory after the fact. So Denise sat emotionless and stone-faced as the verdict was read, just as she had during the whole trial. Yeah. And I actually have a clip of the verdict being read, which I'll insert now.
State of Florida versus Denise Williams. We, the jury, find as follows: as to count 1 of the indictment, the defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. As to count 2, we, the jury, find the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. We, the jury, find as follows: as to count 3 of the indictment, the defendant is guilty of accessory after the fact of first-degree murder. It's been dated and signed by the foreperson. Ms. Eidlet, did I accurately reflect the verdict of the jury? Either side wish to have the jury polled?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Polling means that I need to confirm with each of you that this is your individual verdict as well as the verdict of the jury as a whole. I'll start with juror number 1. Is this your verdict as well as the verdict of the jury as a whole? Number 2? Yes. Number 3? Yes. Number 4? Yes. Number 5? Yes. Number 6? Yes. Number 7?
Yes.
Number 8?
Yes.
Number 9?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 10?
Yes.
Number 11?
Yes.
Number 12?
Yes, sir.
Jury has unanimously confirmed the verdict. It appears to be in order. It will be filed.
The verdicts came just 2 days shy of 18 years to the day that Mike went missing. We got justice for Michael, his mother Cheryl Williams told Assistant State Attorney John Fuchs moments after the 3 guilty verdicts were read by Leon Circuit Judge James Hankinson. In February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison. Now, she got life, but because of his testimony and everything,
because of the deal
they worked out, as long as he was 100% in forthcoming and no bullshit.
And it seemed, as we all listened to the raw, unedited version of his testimony, it seemed like he was pretty truthful.
I've listened to it a couple times in different clips here and there, and I mean, it sounds very genuine. I don't think he's making it up. I think for him, it's a relief to talk about.
Yes, I agree.
And I think at one point he does say, "This feels good."
Yeah.
It feels good. It feels, this is man, this is a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I don't have to carry this anymore. I don't have to hide it. It's something that's just eating him alive. So with that being said, with Denise involved, now she's getting life and he is going to be out in 2036 or something to that effect?
I think so. I'm not sure. So 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley was awarded all assets of her late father's estate and insurance monies due to Denise after her mother signed them over to her to avoid prosecution on 3 counts of insurance fraud. As part of the deal, Ansley may not use any of that money on her mother's legal fees. If she did, she would owe the state a $150,000 penalty. And Denise is now imprisoned at the Florida Women's Reception Center.
Now, one question that I can't find an answer to, but maybe you can help me. Does Cheryl ever get to see Ansley?
You know, that I don't know. I'm hoping so. I really hope that they were able to reconnect, but that's not news.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's a private family matter.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I agree with that.
And I didn't come across anything about that, but I didn't dig into it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you. Well, anyway, moving on, Cheryl and her other son, Nick, had Mike's remains buried in Roselawn Cemetery after a funeral service on September 8th of 2018. His headstone is unique. It lists his birthday, the day he was murdered, and then the day he was buried.
And his headstone actually says, murdered December 16th, 2000.
Yeah.
and then buried September 8th, 2018.
Yeah, Cheryl won't forget that she was right. She knew. It's that mother's
I think
intuition.
a mother knows. I don't know.
Mother's intuition, they call it, right?
Now, ironically, Rocky Bevis of Bevis Funeral Home handled the memorial service and the burial.
Just like in the Sims case.
Now, if anybody had listened to our Sims Family Murder series, that was a 3-part episode as well. Rocky Bevis was the 16-year-old kid who showed up at the crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still got his funeral home, still burying people up there in Tallahassee.
Well, like you said before,
there is something about Tallahassee. And I mentioned this. It was on one of our off-topic episodes, but I'm going to say it here. Tallahassee gives me the creeps. There's something in the air up there. I don't like that city. I really don't.
If you're ever
it's
in
the capital of our state, but there's something not right about Tallahassee.
If you're ever in Tallahassee and you need a safe place, go to Whataburger. It's safe.
That's the only good thing about Tallahassee.
It's safe and the food is good.
Is Whataburger.
Find a Whataburger and go there. They'll treat you right.
All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Thanks for listening to all this testimony and audio that we put together for you.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed the testimony of Brian Winchester because it's very... he can tell the story way better than we can sit here and do it.
Right.
I think
exactly.
You get a feel for what the man was feeling when he put it out there.
And
again, I don't sympathize with him one bit.
No, he is a murderer.
I mean, I sympathize with the fact that he's finally getting this off his chest, but I don't sympathize him at all. So you're right. He's definitely a murderer. So thanks for hanging in there and listening to it. And we hope you all enjoyed it.
So, Lauren, I guess that's going to be it for tonight then, huh?
Yeah. Anyone, if you'd like to support our show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Palmahawk Media. That's PALMAHAWK Media.
And as mentioned at the beginning, check out our website for links to all of our social media, merch store, and all kinds of other good fun stuff.
And please make sure to subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening on and rate and review us. This really helps us branch out and reach a wider audience.
We appreciate y'all's patience for our little break that we took, our summer vacation, if you will. And as always, we thank you very much for listening.
To Paradise After Dark.
Duck, 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 duck.